Is Annette Fisher, and welcome to Let's Talk. Let's Talk is the first of the online version of Let's Build, which we started last year. I'm an architect. I'm a former RIBA Vice President and partner of FA Global. It's an architect's practice. Also the alternate regional VP of the Commonwealth Association of Architects, and have been in practice over 30 years working in the UK and abroad. And we're here to talk to Sumita Sinha and Femi Oresanya, who are candidates in the RIBA elections coming up. Sumita Sinha is running for president, and she is a partner, the owner and partner of Ecologic Architects. She's been in practice over 30 years and is passionate about climate change, sustainability, and inequality in architecture. Femi Oresanya is a principal at HOK. He's been there for over 20 years. He's standing for council. He's the current chair of the AFC, which is Architects for Change. He's also passionate about diversity, inclusion, and the inequality in architecture. Now, what the format for our event today is, we've provided both Sumita and Femi with 4 set questions, which they'll respond to first of all, and then we'll have an interactive Q&A session with questions from the audience and some other questions that have been put to us in advance. So without ado, I'll start with the first question, the first set question, which is, what's motivated you to stand for election now?
It's an honour to be nominated to stand for council again this year, and hopefully it will be second time lucky for me. As a practicing architect, I've been representing my profession in business and academia for the last 25 years. Over that time, I have seen a distinct lack of diversity on RIBA committees, on validation panels, and so 15 years ago, I felt compelled to become more involved in the RIBA. I want our organisation to represent and to promote the views of all its members, whether they be sole practitioners or large established practices. I've been doing this behind the scenes for a long time, but now feel that becoming a council member will allow me to progress the issues further.
And now Sumita. We're just waiting for the question video to come up. Technology. Hang on a minute, I'll just check something here. Apologies, we're just trying to sort something out. Oh, here we go.
People all over the world have suffered from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, following on, we have the global economic shutdown, and we expect to have the worst recession in 300 years. Climate crisis is also expected to make this even worse. So although it may not be the best time to stand for the president of the RIBA, I feel I can make a difference because I have the right skills and the experience to achieve this. I've had 30 years of experience in working on sustainable design and campaigning for equality. I've also written and taught these subjects. I have the experience of crisis management from my work in the NHS as a non-executive.
Thank you, Femi and Sumita. The next question is, how is it different now than at any other time? Femi.
The only difference is that the light has been shone on the issues. The profession has been lagging behind when it comes to equality, diversity and inclusion. However, some inroads have been made. in certain areas like gender parity and the gender pay gap, supporting and celebrating our LGBTQ plus communities, improving the mental health and well-being initiatives, but so much more can be done, especially in dealing with disability in the profession. We also need to address social mobility and create opportunities for access, retention, and progression of people from non-traditional backgrounds. The adverse publicity that arose in June because of a lack of representation at all levels of the RIBA mean that the organisation comes across as being unsure and are slow to react to the current climate. The recent articles in the press back this up. Now, some of those standing are doing so because of this situation, which is fine, but we still need to address the outcome of the Macpherson report 26 years on and the allegations that have been made recently. We are still addressing the fact that some of our members are not able to bring their best selves to work because of their sexual orientation. This is not right. We must work harder to become the exemplar profession of the creative industries.
Thank you, Femi. And we'll now listen to Sumita as well, responding to the same question.
Certainly, these are unprecedented times. There are also 5 candidates, which is unusual, and students can vote for the first time. There is great interest in the architecture elections, both from inside and outside the profession, due to social justice movements such as Me Too and Black Lives Matter. I am the only minority ethnic architect standing for RIBA president after more than 10 years. If I win, I will be the first woman minority ethnic president who has completed her architecture studies outside the UK. And I think this is great for the global vision of the RIBA. So indeed, it's a very different time this time.
Thank you, Sumita. And our third question is, what difference do you think you would make if elected to council this time? Femi.
Being able to take the views from the members of the Architects for Change group straight to council is necessary. Having spent the last 2 years working on the EDI strategy and getting it approved at the board meeting in 2019, that's a major milestone. But we must now work at implementing the strategy. I believe that getting elected will allow me to hold council and board members to account and drive the change that we want to see.
Thank you, Femi. And now Sumita again.
Coming at a crucial time for the profession and for the social and climate movements, my own personal leadership aims and style for this campaign are to: first, create a resilient profession through empathetic leadership, effective communication, and participative decision-making. Secondly, governance through co-production based on ethics, transparency, and accountability. Thirdly, to champion students and diversify architectural education.
Thank you, Sumita. And the last question is, why must the RIBA embrace change and lead on this now? Femi.
The RIBA must embrace change. This is the time. The rest of society has woken up to the issues of inequality, the lack of diversity and inclusivity, and are addressing them. We must take this opportunity to align our profession with others and society so that we can make it the best that it can be and allow all members to be proud of being in the RIBA.
Thank you, Femi. And Sumita.
I set up Architects for Change, the RIBA's Equality Forum, 20 years ago. Despite our campaigns, we see the diversity track record of architecture needs to improve. There are gender and ethnicity pay gaps. Black and minority ethnic architects remain unrepresented in important decision-making for our built environment. The recent disproportionate deaths of Black and minority ethnic people who live in poorly built and polluted environments show that lived experience is important in our leadership for planning our cities and buildings. The tragedy of Grenfell also shows that. The architecture curriculum remains Eurocentric. It needs to be more diverse to attract more diverse students and to attract a global audience. That is why we need a change for architects, which is the name of my campaign. I hope you will support me in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Samita. I like that. Change for architects. Okay, at this point, we'll now have the interactive session, and Samita and Femi will answer questions directly live on this platform. And so the first question I want to ask, which is to Femi, is why is Samita best choice for president now?
Samita is an architect. She's a lecturer. She's a non-exec member of the NHS. She's been fully involved in all stratospheres or of all spheres of our profession for the last 30 years. And you know, she, as you said earlier, she was part of the founding members of the Architects for Change group more than 20 years before it was fashionable. So she's not just a Johnny Just Come, as my mother would like to say. She's walked the walk, she's taught the talk. And I think now we, as an organization, need to have someone that can drive these things forward. You know, we don't want to be navel gazing about what the RIBA is. We know what the RIBA is. The governance structure is set. What we now need to do is to demonstrate as architects that we can be leaders. Okay, and we need a leader who is considered, who can bring everyone along, who will think about students, who will think about small practitioners, and who will think about the big practices. But also on top of that, thinking about climate change, thinking about Grenfell, all the issues that we've had to deal with over the last few years. We need a president that will stand tall and actually do the job. So that's why I think Samita was perfect for to become president this time around.
I couldn't agree more. I've known Samita for very many years, and she's always been a very generous person as well as an accomplished architect and game changer. So I'm now going to direct that question to Samita herself. She's not accustomed to blowing her own trumpet, but at this point in time, I'd like her to elucidate on why you think, Samita, you are the best president now.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, it's happening all the time, isn't it? So yes, as Femi said, you know, basically I've been at this for a very, very long time, and I've had experience. That's, I think, one of the things that distinguishes me from other candidates, that, you know, I have walked the walk. I'm not just talking the talk. And that's really important. And people can promise all sorts of things, but it's 2 years you have as president where you can actually sit on the board and vote and make decisions. And 2 years is a very short time. So if you're electing someone with no experience of having done this before, then you're actually electing the wrong person. You should have someone who's had governance experience, who's had influence in society, in architecture and education. So I feel I have that. And I also have influence in the public sector as well, because I have improved procurement within the NHS. So that's also there. And the thing is that some of my commitment is coming to an end. So I will have the time, because I realized to do this particular, to do this post, to give it the justice that it requires, this time you have to really work at it full time. You can't be RIBA president for 3 days and then do your stuff the other 2 days. It's not going to happen. So I think this is very, very important, very clear that we recognize that.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions coming through from the audience. Simone de Gale, who is also standing for council this year, her question is, what are your proposals to strengthen the RIBA on the political sphere so that we can influence planning policy and climate change issues with a strong voice? And I think, Sumita, if you'd like to take that first.
Okay, so as I said before, I will have to hit the ground running if I want to do this thing. And what I wanted to do here is, for example, I've got like various categories if you look at my manifesto. So under innovation, I want to tackle climate change. So I want to have compulsory CPD and education in net zero design principles for RIBA members and staff in RIBA validated programs. And I want practices to demonstrate ethical considerations in design, choice of materials, and design competition entries. I would also like the RIBA to assist in the post-pandemic green recovery projects in association with other built environment institutions and the government. I would also like support for non-traditional architecture and participatory design. So this, by which I mean, is that a lot of architects do things like community engagement, working with community groups. This is not recognized at the moment under the RIBA. This is seen as a fringe activity. So I would like that to be given its due recognition. And then I would like support and guidance for small practices aiming towards net zero carbon projects and innovation in building technology. So a lot of the funding and support goes to big practices for this, but our small practices, they're working on, I think it's been calculated, something like 60% of the built environment is actually affected by small practices, not the large practices who are doing one-off buildings. So if we can support the small practices to do that, we'll have much more greener infrastructure. So, and you'll see from my election manifesto that I have been nominated or endorsed by people that work in housing associations, in the police, and several other different sectors. So in order to drive forth policy change, we don't need just the RIBA to do it. We need collaboration across sectors. We probably would need, say, Greenpeace helping us as well, because there are issues to do with biodiversity, environmental issues that affect building projects. So we need those sort of groups as well. And we need to work with our cognate professionals. So the RICS, the structural engineers, we need to work with all these groups together. And I think together we're stronger. And that's one of the things I'm talking about. Collaboration actually is part of innovation. So if we can work together in this, that would be a really great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumita. Femi, can I read the question again?
No. I know the question. Okay. I mean, it's interesting because obviously I'm standing for one of the London Council seats, but I see myself trying to get onto council. Yes, we do need to get closer to government. We need to lobby. I'm already part of the mayor's design advocacy, trying to push the architectural agenda forward, trying to ensure that we allow all firms, all practices of all sizes to try and get onto frameworks. We're working quite closely with the mayor at the present moment in looking at one or two issues. So we're doing that. The CEO of the RIBA, he has linked into BID, the business secretariat, and we need to support him along with the president by being very close to these decision makers. As architects, people always come to us when it comes to designing, but we also are very good at problem solving, and we need to actually get closer to to ministers who I think we can find a way of advising them to ensure that they come up with the right decisions. So that's how I think we can do it. And then obviously, currently at Grenfell, that's still ongoing, but trying to ensure that buildings that are designed are fit for purpose and that they do actually allow those who live in them a good quality of life. We should also be responding to this build that the Prime Minister pushed out, and have a really good look at this permitted development that are producing suboptimal accommodation. We as architects, we need to stand up and actually have a voice for those who don't have that voice, to ensure that they can actually have a good standard of living.
Thank you, Femi. We've got the next question from Deborah Bentley, who's based in the US. The current education system of 3-2 Part 3 has not changed in 60+ years. Should architectural education change to encourage diversity? Should we have alternate routes to the professions, such as master's courses, as they do in the USA? Perhaps you'd like to kick that one off, Femi.
Yeah, I'm a Part 3 tutor. I came through that 3-2 scenario. Yes, it was difficult. I think we've been trying for the last few years to try and get that 7-year gap reduced. There are a few courses already out there. There's at Cardiff, where you can do a 5-year Part 2 scenario, and then you do 2 years afterwards. But Deborah's quite right. It is not cheap to become an architect. It actually, the current system makes it very difficult if you are from a lower economic background to get through to the process. So yes, I know that we've got the apprenticeship scheme. Level 6, it's only just happening. I think there are 2 or 3 schools of architecture in England that are currently promoting it. The RIBA needs to be doing more to make more schools of architecture offer that course. So it means that you get to work and study to reduce that. Another thing that I think we as architects and architectural practices, we need to find students that we can sponsor through the system so that they study and they come to work. As for doing another degree and then crossing over, like say in law, yes, it's feasible, but there's a lot of learning that needs to happen. If you're doing a similar course, like maybe engineering or landscape architecture, it may be easier to cross over, but I don't think you could, dare I say, do a degree in English for your first degree, do a crossover course, and then do a Part 2. I don't think for what we as architects do, which requires a lot of knowledge, I don't think that's possible. But if we can find ways, oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, Femi.
You sound quite passionate about this bit.
Yeah, okay. We've still got a couple more questions. I'd like to be able to get through those before we sign off. Samita, would you like to respond to that? Do you need me to reread it?
No, I've read it. It's Deborah's question, right?
Yes.
Hi, Deborah, lovely to know that you're there. Okay, so I do agree, and I'm actually quite worried about the scenario that's coming on to us, because as it is, students find it very hard to get work during their year outs. And we're coming to a situation where practices may not have enough work to give to students during the year out. And I actually came to this country during one of those times, and it was really difficult because I had to get 2 months from this place and 3 months from another place to get the whole 24 months that I needed to complete my PDR. So I have a feeling that this might be something that will happen, and we need to be, I'm also a Part 3 tutor, so I'm really aware of this situation that's coming on. And also, I think we should be looking really, how do we make architecture education more flexible? So in the UK, for example, we have the apprenticeship scheme, and I think we ought to be pushing that a bit more. Mm-hmm. So there's the Future Architects program that we can build on, and I'll try and do that as president. And also offer different ways of doing architecture. So you could be doing like it over a long period, you know, you could be working and going through it. You could be doing it part-time, flexible. So offer different ways, encourage people. You know, there are people really keen to study architecture, don't put them off, but find ways to work around it.
Thank you, Sumita. Actually, it's quite true, because I remember when I was studying, I think that was an option. You could actually be on a sandwich course, as it were, or you could be fully, you know, take the full-time course. And there were a lot that switched between the two. We have another question from Shade Abdul. And she asks, I would like to know what Sumita and Femi will do to improve accessibility for BAME-led practices to get onto public sector frameworks. This is one that's very close to my heart as well. Okay, Sumita, you go first.
Okay, thank you very much, Shade, because this is a really important question. And I think you'll see from a profile of smaller practices, a lot of the smaller practices are led by women or by BME people. So what's happening here is, to get on to big projects, you need to have the experience, you need to show the PII, and all sorts of hassles you have to go through just to get to the pre-app stage. So what I want to do is, first of all, there are a couple of things we can do. First is to actually get practices to bunch, to collaborate together. So say, even if it's like 6 practices offering different specialities. So one could be offering, say, sustainable design, which is, you know, really people want to get onto the procurement system. One could be offering community engagement, and those sort of things that are on the package. Look for it, get your team together, and then once you have a bigger team, you can say, you know, you can even have a name for yourself, and then, you know, perhaps you're able to get insurance as for that particular project. And I know from having been on these bids, you can say that if you get the project, you will get the PII later. So, but make sure you're on that. And, you know, once you start doing it continuously, you will get on the framework. I know from having spoken to people that it does happen, but we just have to be perhaps more patient and more persistent. You know, I really want to, because I work in the public sector as a non-exec, and I've always encouraged people from BME and women-led practices to actually bid for these projects, but they always seem nervous. And I said, no, go for it. Just be brave, go for it. I'll support you.
Well, I'm going to ask, there's a second question before I come back to you, Femi, because there's a section that her question leads nicely onto this next question, which I know that Femi will be chomping at the bit to respond to, but I'm going to let Sumita just carry on with that, which is, what do you have to say about, this is from Graham Redman, what do you have to say about Southwark Council new architect design services framework, reportedly having not a single Black-led architect of this is a procurement problem versus structural problem in the architectural profession and not reflecting the diversity of our city? I mean, this is a pretty important one connected to what Shade has just asked. So Sumita, if you'll answer that, and then I'll get Femi to answer on both of those kind of at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, I can see the two questions are actually related. And, you know, I have to say that apparently they went through this sort of blind interviewing or recruitment or something, and then they came up with the fact that they couldn't find a single BME practice. And I can't believe it. Surely, I just cannot believe that this has happened in Southwark. So obviously the way they looked for it is not right. So whoever was looking for these practices has to look further, has to look at transferable skills, because sometimes you may not have the direct experience, but you could have had experience in something else. So say housing association, which you could bring into something else. and so on and so forth. So you have to be very flexible, because a lot of these practices have never been on frameworks or before, you know, and you have to be really empathetic, listening, and you know, respond to the particular needs of these BAME practices.
Well, I'm going to throw that to you, Femi. First, about what you're going to do for the BAME practices on getting on frameworks, and then about Southwark, you know, this result with Southwark. And then I think I will chip in as well, because I have a view.
Yeah, both questions are interlinked. And yes, it was extremely disappointing, the result of Southwark. And it was called out by the Mayor's office. And I know that the Mayor has got a task force looking at this. But what's the issue? The issue is that you can't get a job unless you show experience. You can't get onto a framework unless you're able to do that. So local authorities, it's within your gift to actually give the odd project out. Okay, it's within your gift, local authorities, to actually say, maybe we'll take a single project insurance out. So the whole PI thing it gets taken away. You know, if they do that and actually give people the opportunity to demonstrate their skill, because it's not because you're not skilled enough to do it, it's, do you have enough of a resource to put together a suitable PQQ to get through the first hurdle? I think Southwark, they said that they must have had close to 800-900 firms coming through. And a number of the BAME firms fell at the first hurdle because they weren't able to answer the 3 questions in the way that they were supposed to get the full mark. It doesn't mean you're not a good architect. It just meant that, you know, you didn't have the marketing machine behind you, or you've not done it before. So it's about asking the right question. It's about saying, maybe if the framework is let, that you put it out there that Southwark, or let me just choose, I'm not going to talk about Southwark because that's going through the machinations, but just choose a council, and they say, we're going to issue 100 places, of which 25 of them will be small, medium SMEs, and a certain percentage of them will be BAME, of which a certain percentage will be black. So you set it out there right on day one, okay? And therefore, you then judge the applications based on what you set yourself. The problem that we have here is that a general procurement, it doesn't, from what I understand, and I'm not a procurement specialist, you can't pull that data. You can't pull the ethnic data because it may not be, someone may actually take you to task on that. So set it out from the very beginning. It's your framework, you know?
I think that's exactly it. It's a kind of affirmative action, but we have to do it. The councils have to take this on board, because these things simply don't float to the top. If they did, we wouldn't have this issue. We wouldn't be talking about it, you know. And they do have to, in my opinion, create a you know, decide, like you said, Femi, and to some extent Sumita, that we're going to have, out of those 110, 25 of those have to be female or minority led projects, and they just have to, you know, put it out there and get people to come in and say, you know, it's a bit like when I was on council the first time, we were doing an article, they wanted to do a brochure about diversity, and I remember a brochure going around with pictures of everybody, of all the people on the council and so on, and it was to invite diversity, and it got to me, and there wasn't anybody from minority background on it, and I said, well, here's me sitting in council, you know, and there is this thing, you know, unless they kind of deliberately, because there is this natural kind of bias, and the only way you can counter that natural bias is to have a forced decision that says we're going to have, you know.
Yeah, but that incident would never have happened if the decision-making body was diverse.
There you go, which is what we're talking about as well. Yes, totally agree with that. Another question, Ariel Chelsea. How will you, as the leader of the RIBA, so this is to Sumita specifically, make clearer the urgency demanded by movements such as Me Too and Black Lives Matter in the practice of architecture and the building profession? As an MArch student, organizations like RIBA often feel, disconnected from educational institutions, which end up feeding into their network. How will your power and outreach hold educational programs accountable for making tangible change in the profession? Sumita.
Thank you, Ariel. Thanks very much for the question, because it's part of my, I don't know if you've seen my manifesto, it is part of my manifesto. What I want to do is I want to take some concrete steps. So the first step, when I was chairing Architects for Change 20 years ago, the RIBA adopted its first equal opportunity policy. And I asked, why aren't the practices doing this? And I was told, well, it's optional for practices. So, you know, the result is that when you see the profile or the web page of a practice, there's nowhere they say we're an equal opportunity employer, because it's seen as like, oh, we're just PC, and, you know, it's we don't want to be like that, you know. We want to pretend we're very open and liberal, so we don't want to put that in there. But I think that's really important, because you can hold them to account. If they have that on their website, that they are an equal opportunity employer and they're not carrying out their duty, then you can hold them to account. So, and then have a look at their gender pay gaps, because if it's a large practice above 250 employees, by law, they have to publish their gender pay gap. And also it's very evident, if you look at the pictures in the office, you'll often see that the board or the directors, all male, all white, and then below them and much below them, you'll have women and minority ethnic architects. So be careful. You don't want to be working, you want to be working for a progressive practice, you know, that's got, hasn't got gender or ethnicity pay gaps. So I want all practices to actually work on these things. And I know I came from India and I felt totally disconnected from the RIBA, and I say so in my video as well, because, you know, I just felt I didn't belong there. And I understand where you're coming from. So I want to make the RIBA a place for students. And I said in my video, so for someone like me, I want to have a special day for students from marginalized background to show their work, you know, Black students to show their work. I just want them to feel included in what's happening in the RIBA.
Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Femi. Would you like to respond on?
Well, there's not much more. I mean, I think Sumita's covered it. You know, the issue that we currently have, yes, this year it's Black Lives Matter. Last year it was Me Too. The year before it was LGBT. We will always have issues when there is an underrepresented group in our society. Okay, that's why for me, I don't like, you know, I don't want to put it in dare I say, a silo, because all areas of underrepresentation mean that the organization, the RIBA, is weaker, which is why, say, the Architects for Change group is looking at those 7 areas. And, you know, for those of you that don't know who are listening, those 7 work streams that we are pushing on with are social mobility, gender parity, BAME representation, LGBTQ communities, disability, mental health and well-being, religion and belief, yeah? So each one of those stops us as architects, as architectural students, from bringing our best selves to university to work, okay? And if we're able to do that, if we're able to tackle those, and it's not a quick fix, because these are systems that are endemic. They've been part of our construct. They've been part of the RIBA and society's construct for at least 180 years. So it's, you know, there is no quick fix. But so long as we acknowledge and then we try and demonstrate within the RIBA, both inwardly and outwardly, that we acknowledge there is a problem. You know, we stand up. We've seen other organizations who are having, you know, to reflect and say, well, maybe 10 years ago we didn't think it was a problem. Maybe 5 years ago it wasn't a problem. 3 months ago, we know there's a problem. That's the first part to redemption, isn't it? You know,
It really is. And I think, I think you hit on a very important point, Femi, which is that we need to have minority representation at senior levels across government, across organizations, across professional institutions, including the RIBA. Because once you do have that, then those voices will be heard, will be spoken, and we are able then to affect the younger ones coming through.
But just also one more point. This isn't to the detriment of the organization, okay? And I'm sorry if I'm labeling this. By actually having a diverse group of individuals who are leading, it actually makes us stronger. We've read the McKinsey reports. We've seen, I read a report by L'Oreal who have decided they know that if they have a diverse senior leadership team, they have a diverse workforce, okay, it actually adds to the bottom line. So if for no other reason, okay, a diverse organization is a richer organization.
Very much so. Okay, I've got a final question from Isabel Deakin. Would you be willing to review the graduate attributes of both Part 1 and Part 2 so that the issues surrounding climate crisis, inclusive design, and equality and diversity are brought to the forefront of our education process? She has two questions. And then the next one was, how can you connect the RIBA with the rest of the UK, as it feels very London-centric at the moment? I think COVID-19 and video conferencing has helped with that. So can we go, start with you, Femi, on the question about you quite interested anyway in the student part.
Well, graduate attributes. I mean, obviously the course is there, and I know that the RIBA, part of its remit is education. Okay, it's already happening in practice. It will work its way down into academia. There are some schools who have always had a very strong sustainability part to their course. The RIBA does. It's a very broad church on how you can get to Part 1, Part 2, and depending on your own personal likes, you can find a school to actually allow you to get there. So I think they're already out there, But yes, and this will actually be for the learning institutions, for the universities, how to try and attract students. If they start to show that their course is actually touching on climate change and the inclusivity, how you design for people like you, the course. I was being interviewed, I think just last week on another forum, and they wanted to know buildings that I found fascinating, and I talked about the pyramids because when I was growing up, that's what I thought. It wasn't the Greek temple, it was the pyramids.
Yeah.
But that's because of where I've come from and where my parents, they were quite, I didn't realize it at the time, but they wanted me to have an overview that architecture wasn't just Western. It actually covered the whole world. Mm. Yeah?
Yeah, thank you. Sumita.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Isabel, for your question. So I teach as well. I've been teaching for 30 years. I've taught Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and everything in between, including architectural engineering as well. So my book, I have to show you this. This has been approved. Sorry, I'm just turning. This has been approved in the US for accreditation for design professionals. And I think that's really important because it's all about those issues that you talk about: climate crisis, inclusive design, equality, diversity. I think there is a connection with all that. If there's a climate crisis, it's the women and the vulnerable people that get affected all around the world. Climate crisis is happening all over the world. We have sometimes a very Britain-centric view of climate crisis. But think about my uncle was a farmer in India. He died in December. So whenever I think about the climate crisis, I think back to what he used to talk about, changes in the monsoon rains where you couldn't farm. There was nothing coming from the farm, and how the animals were dying. For me, it was very real hearing this stuff from him. So But what I find is very interesting is the graduate attributes do not actually talk about that. There's a there's a nod to those things, but it's not taken seriously. So I want to, as you'll see if you look at my website, I have made it part of my agenda, my manifesto, to diversify architectural education. I do not think it's diverse enough, and it doesn't include serious problems of our times like climate crisis. I think you've seen in the papers today that we're not going to hit the 2030 target. And this is really serious because we're literally frying on this little planet that's floating in space. So we have to be really looking at this very, very, very incisively. So how do you connect the RIBA with the rest of the UK? Certainly, I agree with you. It feels very London-centric. And since 1996, I've been trying to make it less London-centric. And I want to get more regional voices heard. And one of the good things about COVID, as I think Annette mentioned, is this digital platforms. And I want to, again, it's in my manifesto, I want to use digital platforms to connect not just with the rest of the UK, but also internationally. I want to use it as a platform for job sharing as well, to connect students, to connect projects, and to connect people. We don't do enough of connection and making use of internet. So I want to do that using that. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I think this last 3-4 months has demonstrated how we can connect better. Yes, we've been forced down it, but we can actually use this now to try and push this agenda that actually the world is a very small place, and that you can gain experiences from different places and different countries. So I know it's right at the very beginning, but wouldn't it be great to be able to connect with another school of architecture on another continent, and then try and address some of those, discuss the issues and come together with common solutions to actually increase our learning. Absolutely. I think this is an exciting time as we try and deal with the after effects of coronavirus, but also using it as a tool to move forward to improve our knowledge of architecture in our world.
Well, I think that's very true. I think this is a silver lining, the COVID-19. The silver lining is in how we're going to be able to use these technologies for communication, and we already are. We've been forced to do it. I think the sky's the limit as to how far we can manipulate these things so that we touch other countries and other places. I'm going to ask we have one last question, or our set questions, and then I'd like to, I think the panelists are going to turn on me, as it were.
Oh, so well, can I ask you one question? Because obviously Sumita and I have been talking, but you are also running for one of the seats. And I just wonder, would you like to tell us why you are running, having been a vice president of the RIBA a few years ago, and I've already gone through it and stepped back, but you're now stepping back into the breach. I wonder if you could just tell us why.
Yeah, I mean, I think quite rightly, when it's a long time ago now, I first was elected to council in 1999, and at that time, I was the first Black person to stand, and therefore was following a series of firsts. But I felt that, and then I've been out of the country for a period, and sort of 2011 to 2017, I was doing a lot in Nigeria and Africa, and I've come back and I'm still working on some projects for mass housing there. But when I looked around and I went to a number of events, and I could see the wonderful crop actually of new young Black architects coming up, that was very exciting for me to see that, because it wasn't there when we were all, we were, very much in silos at that time. But when I look around at these young architects, many of them are not getting the opportunities that I was able to get when I was starting out in practice. I mean, I actually built new construction and got those opportunities and was able to bid for certain things, not so much now, but definitely then. And, you know, I wasn't, the large majority are doing, there's nothing wrong with doing housing, but they're doing very, very small, very tiny projects. And very many of them are not actually building, which is why I started to do Let's Build. And when it came to this election, and I got a mail about should I put myself forward, I thought about it, and I realized that actually, if you want to make a difference, if you want to actually influence things that go on, you actually have to step into the thing, you know, into the arena again. I've thought in the past about running for president, but I've been there, done that. I didn't really want to do that. But I felt that I wanted to, I know that I'm an eloquent person and I'm very persuasive. And I thought it would be useful to have someone like myself on the panel. And especially when Sumita decided that she would stand, I thought to myself, well, okay, this is something that I can put my back behind. This is something that I can sincerely support and provide that what will be a much needed, I think, voice, supportive voice in council to make change, to bring the history of what I've known to the current arena, and be able to influence things outside of the RIBA, not the insular thing, but you know, be able to hopefully create opportunities for and make it easier for the younger ones coming up to actually get building experience and, you know, grow their businesses in such a way that they will become, you know, real contenders for, you know, frameworks and the like. You know, we've got to think big. I just felt that it was all so twee. Everything around the sort of Black and ethnic and, you know, elements was very small thinking. And I thought, we've got to think bigger than that. Maybe that's something of, you know, coming out of, again, working in Nigeria, because everything there is huge, you know, and, you know, it is massive. And I just felt I needed to give that voice. And so, yeah, I decided, well, you know what, I'll throw my hat in the ring. I don't want to compete with Sumita because, well, I'm just excited that, you know, a minority person who I think is amazing is standing, and I think it's important. I felt it was important that we do everything we can to get this, to get her into the role of president, so that we can, as a council and as a group within that council, affect change.
Thank you. That's an amazing response, and I'm grateful that you're standing, because again, we need to show where we've come from when you were trying to smash that glass ceiling in 1999, and just to see so many different individuals standing for council and for president this time around. I think it's fantastic just to see the numbers, and it just shows that, you know, we as a profession are committed to making change, but it can only happen if people go out and vote.
Yeah.
We need, for those of you who are listening, I suppose we're preaching to the converted, really, because you've made the time and given and made the effort to join this call. But what we need to be able to go out there and get all our RIBA friends to vote, so that we can actually try and make that change. You know, just like everyone else, there is no there's no money to be gained here. It's about how you move your profession forward, and us sacrificing the time and energy. I just hope that the electorate get behind us all and try to make that happen. And it will be great to have Sumita as president.
It will. Sumita, would you like to have the last word?
Oh, thank you very much. I wanted to also say thank you to Annette, because she's been absolutely rock. And she sent me all these lovely messages. I wish I could just put them on the screen somewhere you could see. But I'm going to keep them, you know, because we need those messages, not just for standing for president. You need them forever.
So I'm going to keep them. Thank you, Annette.
Awesome.
And I wanted to say, you know, just look back to 2008 and 2009, that period, right? So we were there was a financial crash at that time with the Lehman Brothers and everything. There was the avian flu pandemic going on. And there was a youngish Black American with a funny name standing for the president of the United States. And he won.
Yes.
So it was one of, I mean, if you look back at what he achieved, it's absolutely amazing. I keep reading books all the time. And if you think, and he did that with younger people. So if you watch his videos, he did it with younger people. And it's the first time that students can vote. And I feel that makes a difference, because I think students are much more radical and they're willing to make a change. And even younger architects are much more radical. I'm not suggesting that all older architects are not radical, but generally it's the younger people who are. If you look at the Black Lives Matter, there were people from all backgrounds there protesting against you know, the atrocities. And so I think this is a moment of great change. We have to make change happen. And that's why I've sort of called my campaign Change for Architects. It has to change.
Has to change. Okay, well, I think we're almost out of time. Is there anything else anyone you'd like to share before we close our session?
I think I'll go with what Femi said, you know, we've got this moment. Please don't waste your vote. Please vote.
Please
you know, when the time comes, and please remember what we said. Go back and look and see what's been happening. Think about it. Vote for the right people.
That's
and,
it.
You know, I mean, I can see the people that are on the call. Thank you. There are also some other candidates as well who are on the call. Thank you for your time. And I hope, and I wish you the very best of luck as well. Because again, if we're able to all get on, then it just means that council will be richer, you know, in terms of thought and in terms of decision making. So, so yeah, thank you very, very much. And thank you, Annette, for organising this. And, you know, it's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you both. It's been great. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for attending. Please vote, vote, vote. This is how you make a difference. Thank you so much. Bye.